Water features for your tabletop war games terrain, today on Attention Span Labs. Welcome to another episode of Attention Span Labs. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Mike. And Attention Span Labs is a channel for me to talk about whatever I want to talk about in the realm of my hobbies. And if you were tired of my most recent string of videos about everything from G.I. Joes to role-playing games to what's wrong with modern comics, you'll be happy to know that I'm back here talking about tabletop crafting today, and specifically going to talk about some of these terrain features in front of you, basically how to make lakes, rivers, streams, marshes, and swampland for your tabletop war games or role-playing games, and also do a bit of a vlog on some other terrain projects I'm working on. If you ask me, water features are one of the coolest things you can do in a tabletop terrain setting, but a lot of people shy away from it because they feel they don't know how to do it right, or they think it's too complicated and messy. And spoiler alert, it absolutely can be. So when I talk about doing these three ways, I'll talk about three different techniques that you can use. Let's start with the cheapest and easiest, but maybe the least satisfactory of them. Look at this piece of, this was a sort of test piece of terrain I built. It was originally supposed to be just a muddy battlefield area, and then I may lay some a pipeline on it. But this is just my normal feature of taking a little base of chipboard with a foam board from the dollar store and beveling it, covering it with sand. And the puddles were made by dabbing a bit of acetone, otherwise known as nail polish remover, but I would say use full strength acetone rather than nail polish remover. It works much better. Put it on a cotton ball and wipe it over the exposed foam. So it's important to peel off the top paper layer, or this won't work, and that eats away. If you've ever gotten acetone or any other kind of solvent on the foam, you know that it melts it. And that creates the irregular puddle features, but then they have to be filled with something. So I filled this with Elmer's glue and let it dry. And you can use a lot of different kinds of Elmer's glue. I recommend the clear glue. Now, you may say to yourself, isn't all Elmer's PVA glue supposed to dry clear? It dries mostly clear. It's a little cloudy, which actually may be good for something like this, but it can tend to take on a yellow complexion as well. I use the glue that's clear before it dries as well. I don't know if it helped any. I mixed in some paint. It's actually I mixed in like a blue-green paint, which is probably inappropriate for these sorts of puddles, which are pretty shallow. But it does give you a very cheap, very economical effect. You can do a lot of it. The problem is, as you can probably see, they're not level. Unlike water, real water, Elmer's glue does not necessarily seek its own level. I guess there's some surface tension and it adheres to the side, so there tends to be a divot in the middle. So you're going to have to do this with several coats over time. But it is possible, and in fact, in some of the older tabletop wargaming materials I have that talk about making terrain, including some stuff from Games Workshop, including West End Games, original Star Wars miniature battles. It mentions just making water courses using Elmer's or PVA white glue. So that's one solution you have. It's not the best, as I said, mainly because of the inability. It's okay. I mean, it's not too bad. If you don't do well on it, you're not going to notice it too much. But the other problem, I wouldn't. This piece is warped a little bit. It's not because of the glue. I don't think that certainly contributed to some of it, but it was a bit warped beforehand. But as I said, this was mainly a test piece. Now I will show you the second way, which is probably the most obvious way. It's also the most expensive by far. It has a very pretty effect. It's very even, but it does have a lot of drawbacks. And this is the Woodland Scenics Easy Water. stuff you pour out of a bottle, and it has you can watch Woodland Scenics videos on how to do this. But anyway, I made this little pond here. But before I go into the pros and cons of the Easy Water, I'll talk about how I made this. First thing I did, it is a chipboard base, and I experimented with this for a while. So I actually took a piece of the foam board, cut it out on the outside, then also cut out a shape in the middle, and then took the rim, glued that down, sealed it with hot glue all around, and then sealed it a couple more times. And then after I was done flocking the base, this is I painted. So I spray painted it black, painted it over with burnt umber, raw umber, did a bit of shading, flocked it, put the brushes and stuff on the side. And these are this is just coconut fiber from like a flower potting. Doesn't look that great. Now I haven't been taking a lot of care of this piece because it is warped. And it warped in the production. We'll talk about that in a minute. But to get the effect, I actually do like the color effect very much here. I painted it with the sandy shore around the edge, and then painted it a grayish blue to a lighter blue, to a grayish to a lighter blue, and then to a very dark blue in the middle, simulating depth. And then I poured the Easy Water over it. Now, as I said, Easy Water makes a beautiful level effect. There's no, you don't have the divots in the middle of the water as you did for these, because it actually does take its own level. The first problem with Easy Water is that it does not like to stay. So when I said about sealing the edges, you absolutely have to do a good job of that. You may also use tape or some temporary structures to block it in. There are much better videos than this that will show you how to do it firsthand. And I apologize in advance if my dogs start barking. My wife's about to come home, so they're going to be barking pretty soon. Anyway, the key to this is you have to be very careful, and because it will leak out. It will find, like real water, it'll find its way out, and it's touchy. It's a bit of a mess to do. This one I actually did pretty well. I didn't have a big leak. What I did have is significant warping. And this, unlike the other piece, was actually level to begin with, but you can see now the warpage on it. The other thing that takes a long time is that it takes a long time. This takes about 24 hours to dry. And that whole time you're trying to keep dust from getting in it, trying to keep bubbles from coming up. Bubbles aren't too hard to deal with. Bigger problem is if you have cats like I do, you have to keep the cats from coming and bumping it or stepping in it. And it's very sticky and it sticks to things. So good effect, really expensive. It warps and it takes a really long time to dry. Now, of those techniques, and I know there are better techniques even than these, I'm going to talk about these next three pieces. These are, first, I was trying to make marsh terrain. And if you're unfamiliar with your geology and topography, the difference between a marsh and a swamp, so they're both wetlands that are partially flooded. Marshes have predominantly grasslands, whereas swamps are predominantly forest. So don't say you didn't learn anything by watching War Games terrain videos. Anyway, these same technique as the first one. We're actually I took they're foam board bases. These are not covered with chipboard underneath, but they are PVA glued with Wylock's technique to help unwarp them and straighten them for any warpage. But then I hit them with the acetone on the cotton ball to eat away these irregular puddles. Painted them per usual. Again, black spray paint, a big brush of burnt umber, dry umber, blended it in, did a couple shades of dry brushing. Cover them with flock, static grass bushes, longer tall grass clumps that I did by hand. But the water surface on these, I think they actually look excellent on the tabletop. There's a little bit of warpage, but I think that's more to do with the glue than anything. These would make excellent scatter pieces to represent marshy terrain. This one you can see I had a cairn. A cairn is a rock pile that are all around the world, and they're used as, sometimes they're grave markers. Most often they're just like path markers, and they're just piles of rock that become more or less cemented together over time. So this was obviously marking some kind of trail through this marshland, and this would make great piece of scatter terrain. It would make difficult terrain in any kind of appropriate serious war game which takes terrain effects into movement. So say unlike Warhammer 40k 8th edition, but previous editions of 40k, Stargrunt, things like that, it would pose a certainly difficulty to heavy tracked vehicles. Would be very good for hover vehicles to go through, but yeah, so that's how you can use them in your game. But the water effect feature, which is probably the main reason what you're listening to this for, and the same thing with this river section here. And this river section is meant to be a modular section, so I didn't finish the edges, because the idea is it's going to go up against other river sections, curves, and you can have a modular river, make them about the same width at the beginning and end. And again, the same technique here. I actually did the river banks here were made. This is just one piece of foam core, but instead of eating away at it with acetone, I built up the river banks with Sculptamold, which is a fantastic thing. I talked about it in some other videos, but I go so far as to say it's an essential for wargame crafting, and I wish I knew about it a while ago. But and then filled it in as with these with any guesses so far? It's a Mod Podge Dimensional Magic. Now, if you're not familiar with Mod Podge Dimensional Magic, I only heard about it by accident as well, but it's for jewelry crafters mainly. So it's made by Mod Podge company that makes Mod Podge. I guess Plaid is the company that makes Mod Podge. We often use it for sealant, for fixing things. It's sort of kind of it's kind of like PVA glue. It's an adhesive, but it's also a decoupage. I'm not sure exactly what that translates to in English, but it's a sealant to cover or protect it. And I often put it over foam when I'm about to spray paint it. But the Dimensional Magic is made for jewelry crafters who want to basically inset something in, like maybe a ring or a piece of jewelry, a pendant or something, and have like a plastic bubble over it. By plastic I mean like a resin bubble. And I think it makes excellent water features because it does seek its own level. It doesn't leak nearly but it's not as fluid. It doesn't leak nearly as much. And as the Woodland Scenics water, it does not warp, and it dries in several hours. So it's in between the PVA glue, this, and the scenic water here. In that, it's more closer to the dry time of the PVA glue. It's several hours. It's cheaper, but it is quite a bit more expensive than PVA glue as well. You only get a little bottle about this big. Thinking about it now, I should have brought it down so I could show it to you. But I will leave a link in the description. You can go on, buy it from Amazon, and also have a Michaels or anything. But if you buy it from the Amazon link in the description, I'll get a little kickback at no extra cost to you. So I do appreciate that. And any other ways you'd like to stop in and support this channel, financially or just by sharing it. It does mean a lot to me. So I want to thank you guys for listening. The main difference, back to the water feature here, is the painting. Say I just made this muddy, but this has some blue elements to it. I probably would have made it more green. In other sections, I'm going to make it more green because shallower river water the shallower the water is, the muddier, browner, the greener it is. When it's really deep, then it becomes blue. Generally, not always, but the less sediment there is visible in it, it becomes bluer. But I did paint the edges around. Again, all this painting is done before the Dimensional Magic goes on. But then the big difference here is that this is moving water. So after it was done, I covered it with regular Mod Podge. And I did it with a big brush, stamping down like this and making patterns of waves to show the current, and then it dries clear, but it catches the light because it actually adds a bit of relief to the surface. So there you go. That's a quick discussion of wargame terrain, water features, 3 ways. And now move on to show you one of the other completely different piece of industrial terrain that I'm working on now. It's only the early stages, it still has to be painted and everything, but I think you'll like it. Give me a second to set it up. Now for the video log entry of this post, I don't know how often I'll do this. I just thought it would be interesting to show you this thing I've worked on just one night so far over my Christmas, New Year's vacation. And I just, you know, I may do more kinds of things showing you works in progress like this if you like them. This will just be a quick overview of this piece of, it's supposed to be internal industrial terrain. You can see I did not bevel the base, it's just a square base. I didn't try and make it natural. But this was really inspired by some awesome videos I saw recently on Eric's Hobby Workshop and Dark Matter Workshop, 2 other excellent terrain channels, which you're probably, if you're watching this channel, honestly, you're probably already familiar with them. But if not, I will drop a link in the description. But they made such nice Necromunda and Kill Team terrain that I wanted to get into doing something a little different than the natural stuff that I was doing. And so I made this, whatever this is. I don't know if it's DM Jim from the Tabletop Engineer suggested this is some sort of chemical processing plant or a part of it, and I'm certainly inclined to agree with him. But it's just built, it's black bombed, and it needs to be painted, which obviously will probably be by far the longest part of this, even though I'll be using airbrush and my wife will be helping me. But you can see the scale by this Space Marine Scout in the middle. It is made for 28mm scale. And I'm trying to move this guy through the camera viewfinder, so my depth perception is not what it should be. But some interesting features here. I really like the look of it. It took me several hours, a couple days before New Year's Eve, putting this together. I needed to relax, and so I did. Yeah, one of the ways I relax is by building terrain. Painting's a different story. But I'll show you some of the features up close, and you can tell me what you think of the design and textures and pieces. I won't right now go into what all these pieces are, what they're made out of, how I made each part. I'll leave that to you as an exercise and see what kind of things you can put together yourself if you're interested in doing stuff like this. And certainly, if you want to leave a comment and guess where these pieces come from, what they're made out of. If you want to ask questions there, I will answer them for you there too, and maybe in a future video as well. It's got lots of wires and conduits, and there's pumps, and that's supposed to be a hatch, which I have to add my stapler step ladders going down. That's the other feature I need to add, is the large staples as handholds and step ladders. Got this large storage tank here, which also has top on it. You can see from looking down, it's pretty tall, but it's not so tall that it's so large it's too difficult to handle or get in a box like some of my other pieces of terrain, frankly, are, like the Tower of Hearing. But I banged it up a bit, but my goal was to not make it look completely torn down and dilapidated. So it definitely has undergone some wear and tear, but this should still be a functional objective. So let me know what you think about this. And if any of these videos encourage you to make your own terrain, you make videos about them or you put them on your blog, I'd certainly like to hear about it. I'm always interested in seeing other people's terrain, and I like getting ideas from them as well. Please let me know if any of the techniques I mentioned, like for the water, especially if you also use Mod Podge Dimensional magic for water, and what you think of it. And if you have better solutions for water. Okay, I think that's about it for this episode of Vlog. If you liked the video, please give us a thumbs up. subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Tell your friends. Share this on your wargaming and RPG groups on your social media. And if you really want to support me, there'll be some links to Amazon to buy some of this terrain crafting material that they'll give us a kickback. But most especially, I encourage you to check out my books. I'm a writer. I have 6 published heroic adventure novels and short story collections, which you're probably already aware of by now if you're a regular viewer of this channel. But I think they're really good. And if you like the thought I put into things like this, I think you may enjoy the world building and, of course, the adventure and excitement in them as well. But that's all I have for today. This is Mike from Attention Span Labs signing off. And Happy New Year, everyone.